So welcome, folks. Really glad to have you all here. I'm Michelle with Family Violence Project. I'm a community awareness and prevention educator. And Lori, do you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hi, everyone. My name is Laurie Woods, and I am the Community and Court Advocate with Family Violence Project, and I'm happy to be here today.
So we are going to be talking about domestic violence in rural communities. As always, we hope that people will do whatever they need to do to take care of themselves. We know that talking about domestic violence, and we're going to be talking about tactics of abuse and many different pieces today, as usual. So please do what you need to do to take care of yourself. If you need to step away, take a break. Let's, do whatever you need. And also know that the helpline is here 24/7 for everyone. I think sometimes people think it's just a crisis line for people to call if they're, currently in danger, which, we are here for folks who are currently in danger, but we're here for friends, family, providers, loved ones who have questions, if for anyone who has questions really. And if something that we talked about has brought up something for you, know that you can call the helpline and get support too. And I'm going to hand it over to Lori. We're going to do a little bit of an intro again. We haven't done this part in a while, so we're going to go back to the beginning a little. So take it away, Lori.
Okay, so we're going to start with just the definition of domestic abuse. So domestic abuse is a pattern of coercive controlling behavior. It is intentional, it is purposeful, it's not a one-time incident. The key word there is pattern. It is something that is ongoing. It is in the context of a relationship. The relationship can either be an intimate partner, household member, family, or caregiver. It's chosen by the abuser to enforce their position of power and control over the victim. It instills fear and denies the victim of their personal liberty. Some examples of that can be as simple as it can an abuser can stop somebody from leaving their home, which they obviously have a right to do, or it could be as big as an example would be having a victim seeking medical attention, either for an injury that occurred during an incident, or maybe even somebody who is seeking medication for their mental health, or so it can be a big size of the spectrum. Domestic violence, the perpetrator believes that they are entitled to this position of power over those they victimize. These beliefs stemming from cultural context that privileges the rights of some other over others based on gender roles, ability, class, color, age, and other factors. Okay, we can go on to the next one.
Yeah, and so when we think about who domestic violence affects, we know that it affects so many people all along, across all the different demographics. So, I think we have an idea of who is a victim or survivor of domestic violence, and we want to sort of throw that out of our heads because we know it could be anyone. We know it happens to anyone regardless of age, religion, how much money they have, what their education level is, what their sexual orientation is, what their gender is. We know that this can affect anyone and it does affect everyone. And so we also know that the people mostly using violence are men using violence against women. That's 82% of the violence that happens. But we also know that men can be victims of domestic violence at the hands of their same-sex or female partners, that women can be abusers in same-sex or heterosexual relationships. Also with trans folks, we know people who are transgender experience even higher rates of abuse. And so we just want to let people know that we're here for everyone. We provide services to everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, who people are, how much money they have, how, whatever someone's going through, if they're experiencing abuse, we're here for them. And I also want to just make a note about language. We often will use the term victim or survivor, but we know people who are experiencing abuse often just want to be called by their name. They may not resonate with either of those terms. So we just want to use their name. And same with, when we think of like the language of perpetrator, I think in our society, we think like when we hear that word, we think of like someone like a swamp creature crawling out at night. And We know that the people who are using violence are our friends, our family members, our neighbors, our coworkers. We know that the people using violence are also people in our community. And we may, in this context, call them abusers, perpetrators, different things. But if you're working with someone, just mirroring their language, because we know that these people can be anyone in our community. And it's part of, like Lori mentioned, that social context. Like, there are lots of messages in our society that really allow domestic violence to happen. It's not just someone thinking, oh, I can do this to my partner. There are lots of things, unfortunately, that reaffirm that. And so we'll talk about that more as we go on.
Okay, so this is a power and control wheel. Each piece of this kind of describes a behavior or a tactic that our abuser would use to gain power and control over somebody. This wheel has been in the movement. We've been using it for over 40 years. It's one of the handouts or visuals that we offer survivors or victims a lot. And it can be very insightful. I've heard a lot of feedback from survivors that this wheel has pretty much just described what's been going on in their relationship. Some of them have told me I facilitate a support group. So some of them have told me that all these things are going on in their relationship, and others have said that there's a couple things. So just going to go over it a little bit. It has certain behaviors or tactics, and then there's examples. Intimidation, just a lot of sometimes the people that I talk to would just talk about, they know when their partner is mad because they send them this sort of look. And so they know that they're upsetting for some reason their partner, and they have to be careful about how things are going to play out. Destroying property, especially personal property, pictures of people maybe who have passed in their family, or pictures of their children, or just knickknacks that they may have, just things that mean a lot to them. There is a tendency to destroy those things in order to cause the victim distress. Abusing pets is another one that's there's a big correlation now between animal abuse and domestic abuse. They have now added the pet who can be protected on a protection from abuse order. So that was kind of a big deal, and we're really happy about that, because a lot of people will not leave because they're concerned for their pet's safety if they leave. Maybe a family member said, yeah, you could stay with us, but you can't take your 2 dogs with you. And so that would be, that might maybe a deal breaker for that particular person, but now they can include them on the on the protection orders. So emotional abuse, putting her down, calling names, telling somebody that they're crazy all the time, playing mind games, gaslighting is a big thing that can go under this. Gaslighting is just trying to lead somebody to believe that the reality isn't so. So it gets them to question about what's going on. Is this my fault? Did I do something wrong? So emotional abuse can be very effective. Some people feel that it's much more damaging than physical abuse to them. So, and it's a tactic that's used quite often in a domestic abuse relationship. Isolation, of course, that can be very effective when you're isolating somebody from their family, their friends, their support systems, taking them away, moving them out of state. Also things like looking at their phone all the time, or telling them that they don't really like their friends, and then every time they get back from seeing a friend or something, there's some kind of problem with the partner, and things escalate, and it's just become such a big deal that sometimes the victim will decide that it's not worth continuing those relationships, and that will be in turn more isolating to them. Jealousy, where are you going? What are you doing? Constant. So that would isolate a person also and make them feel like they can't do these things because the result of the backlash is abusive behavior from the partner. The next one, minimizing, denying, and blaming, making light of the abuse, not taking their concerns about it seriously, saying it didn't even happen. I don't know what you're talking about. Shifting responsibility for abusive behaviors. A big thing that I've heard a lot is the blaming, that it's your fault, you did this, therefore, I yelled at you or I assaulted you. So the blaming is really big. It's never the abuser's fault. There's a total lack of accountability. So it's always somebody else's fault, and minimizing. It wasn't really a big deal. I don't know why you're making it such a big deal. Happens a lot too. Next one, using children. Of course, this is very distressful for a victim. Children are very important to their parents, and using the children, making them feel guilty about maybe leaving, because then they're separating the family, they're breaking up the family. So the abuser will really kind of reinforce that they're destroying the family if they leave. Using the children to send messages when sometimes when victims do leave, well, if they have children, they still have that co-parenting that has to go on. So using the children to relay messages can happen a lot. So what was say your mom doing all weekend? I saw a car over there. Whose car was it? Or just saying, just asking intrusive questions of the children, or asking the children to tell the other partner this or that. So that's using the children, saying you're going to call Child Protective Services. Can be very distressing to a parent, because certainly they don't want to think that their children could be taken away. Using privilege, should really be just using privilege. So just like feeling like, well, I'm the one making more money, therefore I should be the one making all the decisions. Very distinct roles, it says, being the ones to define the men's and women's roles. I should be working, you should be home cooking, just things like that. It's kind of old school, but in some way it still plays out in these relationships. Using economic abuse, financial abuse, same thing. That's something that we have a lot more awareness around than we did, say, 15, 20 years ago, as far as being used as an abusive tactic. Examples of that is preventing somebody from getting a job or keeping a job. Maybe somebody has got a job and then the abusive partner is calling them constantly and disrupting their work productivity, and finally the employer just has to say, I just can't keep you here. So they've lost their job over it. Or telling somebody, or somebody is going to their job and their car needs to be fixed and not willing to help fix that job, so they fix that car so they can continue being employed. So sabotaging their work, taking their money. If they do, suppose they are on disability, taking their disability check. Or just even taking their money at the end of the week that they make on their being employed. Also, let's see, allowance. Yeah, just making all the decisions around the money, the financial decisions. There is now also, due to the awareness around financial abuse, there is a question when you're filling out a protection from abuse order that asks if you are a victim of financial abuse. So that's a big step too. Okay, so the last one, using coercion and threats. Making and carrying out threats to do something to hurt her, threatening to leave her, to commit suicide. That unfortunately, is a tactic that a lot of abusive partners use. Someone threatening to commit suicide is a very serious threat. Unfortunately, it's used a lot of times to, I guess, potentially keep the partner in the relationship, because I don't think anybody really wants that kind of guilt on their shoulders, like they would be responsible for somebody, harming themselves. So it's used a lot, unfortunately. Almost when we look at protection orders, that's usually on there, unfortunately, about one of the things that the partner is doing. But it's effective, and can potentially keep somebody within the relationship. Making her do illegal things, say, if you don't do this, then I'm going to get the kids taken away, or I'll tell the police that you did this at one point if you don't continue to do this for me. So, yeah, that's it. So in the hands of an abuser, anything can be a weapon.
We know that there are tactics that are specific to rural areas and specific to, like Laura said, in the hands of an abuser, anything can be a weapon. So using geography as part of that tactic, it can be part of that. So looking at, some different ways this may happen is an abuser may move you to a rural area, maybe their hometown, maybe they know people there and you don't. And so now they have all of these connections. Maybe they use that against you too, of like, go ahead and call the police. I went to high school with them. Who are they going to believe, me or you? Maybe they have lots of supports. Maybe they have people in their lives that are supporting what they're doing. Maybe the only connection you have there is their parents, and they're totally fine with, the abuse that's happening. They're aware and, not caring about it. And in rural Maine too, it's really hard to make connections, right? So that just the geographical isolation that can happen is a part of that tactic. Maybe there's only one car and the abuser uses it for work, and then you're left with no way to leave. Think of how remote people can be here. And if that car is the only way to get out, that can be a part of that. And maybe they take your shoes and winter coat, so you don't even have the option of walking, which, and that may sound extreme, but we hear a lot of really horrific things that abusers do to keep that isolation happening. Maybe they're locking them out. In winter in Maine, you cannot be locked out for long. It is, it's pretty scary. And depending on how far away neighbors are, that can be a part of that. Maybe they don't let you have a cell phone, or they take your phone with you when they leave, so that you can't make calls, you can't have any connection. Maybe they have cameras in the house. There are all kinds of things that could happen that make it really hard for you to connect with other people. So, and it's hard how technology is also used against folks. That's missing from the power and control wheel because it was made so long ago. But unfortunately, there are lots of ways that technology can also be used to monitor people and to keep people in dangerous situations.
Barriers in rural areas. So one of the biggest ones is transportation. We know we don't have any public transportation in Maine, which is really, really difficult for a lot of people, but especially for victims that live in rural areas. They don't have any means to get anywhere to if the abuser could be hindering them from getting to their medical appointments, to their mental health appointments, to file a protection order. If you don't have transportation, you don't have the ability to do that, except now, since COVID started, you can file online. So that is a big step too that they've taken to make it easier for people in rural areas. Of course, it did come out of COVID, but it serves a double purpose. And court, after you file a protection order or divorce or parental rights and responsibilities, you have a court date, and you need to get to that. And they were doing them over Zoom, but now not so much. So you have to request that. And it's not always granted. There has to be special circumstances. So hopefully being in a rural area would be that special circumstance. But So transportation is a really big one. Geographic isolation, where you're at, you're not near any resources, you're not near a hospital, you're not near a police department, so you're not in a community where you have a lot of neighbors. So just geographic isolation can be a real barrier. Distance between houses. When we talk to people, sometimes we talk about, do you live in a house? Do you live in an apartment complex? Who are your neighbors? Are you comfortable talking to your neighbors about the situation? And maybe they could be extra eyes for you. But when you're in a rural area, you may not have a neighbor. Your neighbor might be 3 miles away. So that is a real barrier, and that can be a real barrier in safety planning that way with a victim. Isolation, especially in winter, we all know that we just like to, more of us stay inside during the winter, of course, than we do in other seasons. But for a victim, that is really, isolation can be really difficult, not talking to family or friends, possibly because the abuser is always monitoring everything they do, doesn't want them talking to family or friends. Maybe if they're, in a place where there's no reception, there's nothing really happening other than, being with that abuser and how they're playing out and trying to play out in the relationship. Can be very isolating. So there's no police departments around in some of the rural areas. Some police departments, it takes 45 minutes just to get there. They're so isolated. And of course, that can be really, really a problem when somebody's calling, especially if things have escalated and there's been an assault. And you need safety immediately. It's not, that's difficult to get immediate attention, either from the police or to get to a hospital immediately if you need to. So that can be really difficult. And we all know rural Maine, spotty internet cell service can be a problem. Also, if you're looking to call out to somebody and you're looking to call maybe a family, a friend, or even the police, and you can't get service, that's really a big barrier and problematic to a victim.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the cultural components that exist. There are many different pieces, right? In Maine, I think we think about culture as something that other people have, like, oh, the culture in different, countries, but we have culture here. And one of our cultural beliefs is that what happens over there is their business. We don't get involved. If anyone asks us for help, we're there in a second, but like what's happening over there isn't our business. And that's a real big problem, right? Because that creates an unwillingness to intervene, to provide support, to call police, to check in, when those things can be, not doing things sends a message, right? It sends a message to the abuser that it's okay. And it sends a message to the person experiencing abuse that people don't care, that it may be affirming what the abuser is telling them. No one cares about you, you're not important. um you know so and we know that people have to do what they need to do to be safe for themselves. But hopefully calling the police could feel like an option, or checking in with them the next day. You see the abuser's car gone, maybe, or you see your neighbor go to the mailbox, just be like, hey, I heard some yelling last night. Is everything okay? If you ever need anything, I'm here. If you want me to call the police, and we'll talk about that more with safety planning, but being able to make that connection of like, I see you, even if they say, no, 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 everything's fine, it was not a big deal, it still just shows them like, you do care, you are there and you do care. Being in a very small community may prevent someone from reaching out. They might be like, oh, I know someone who's there. His aunt works there. My sister works there. Like whoever it is, like they might be really scared to reach out because of maybe someone they went to high school works there, and that feels like a barrier because they don't want people to know their business. Small towns, it really it can make it hard. It can be, that community building that happens is really great, but sometimes it can create a barrier too. So we always just want people to know that we are a confidential service. We're still able to, support people. If someone calls and I answer the phone, I'm gonna If I know them, I'm going to refer them to another advocate so that they can speak freely without, concerns about me knowing things. So we just want to mention that piece too. Um, as we know that can prevent. There's a lot of shame around domestic violence, which is awful because that survivor, we know that that's not their shame to carry. There's nothing they did to make this happen. And we kind of shame help seeking behaviors. Like we believe in self-sustenance of I can get through anything by myself. We see this, with substance use and mental health too, where like we don't want to get help because we think we can get through it alone, but we all need each other, right? We all need support sometimes. We all need each other. We're so happy to help others. We need to be willing to let others help us too. And a lot of people have firearms. This is kind of a scary thing, right? It's very normalized. It's okay. Hunting, protection. We understand that people have those for those reasons, but we also know it can increase danger for folks. And we like living in the country, I hear gunshots all the time. And I don't know, like, could say, oh, it's coming from over there, but how do we know if it's target practice or something dangerous? Where if you hear it in town, I think people may have a different response than in the country. And just the overall shame and stigma, like I mentioned. And in rural areas, there is higher rates of substance use, unemployment, and those can create, even though we know those aren't causes for abuse, we know they can contribute to abuse. And also religious beliefs can sometimes contribute to those belief systems of, marriage is forever, I can't leave them, or maybe I don't want to leave because I'm a part of this religious community or this faith community. And if I leave, I'm going to lose those people too. So whether that's because of geography again, because maybe if they leave, they're going to have to go far because that's where the shelter is, or that's where a family member is that they can stay with. So we know there are all these different pieces that go into it.
Safety planning in rural areas. Okay, so safety planning is something that we do constantly with victims. We do it just about every single helpline call that we get. Safety planning, I just want to mention, is very individualized. What would work with one person may not work with another. And it's also can be ever changing. Somebody may be in a situation and we make a safety plan that they are going to um, um, have their phone with them at all times. But then maybe things change in 2 months where now their phone's been taken away from them. So we need to change that safety plan. So they are really ever changing. And so our helpline is a good kind of point place for people to do that. So in safety planning, we can suggest things like somebody have an extra phone, a burner phone, putting it somewhere where the abusive partner cannot find it or know about it, so they can at least call 911, or giving somebody, the family or friend, that number so that they can reach out or have contact or check in with that victim. Support folks and what their resources are. So just telling people like what's in their area that they can access. If somebody, just as an example, suppose somebody calls our helpline and wants to seek shelter and our shelters are full, we would give them numbers and information around other domestic violence agencies in our state or local homeless shelters, or refer them to their local general assistance office. So it's just about knowing resources and providing those and whatever can be helpful for that victim in that particular situation. Keep phone close if conflict. Just always have your phone with you so that you can call 911 if something is going on and the situation escalates. Avoid kitchen places with weapons when fighting or being cornered. So you don't want to be in an area where you can't get out of if somebody is going to be aggressive towards you or harm you. Avoid kitchens. You don't want to be around knives or things where somebody can just pick up a knife and use them as a weapon. So trying to avoid those places. Talked a little bit about having a neighbor and having a conversation with a neighbor to make a plan, make a code word with a family, friend, neighbor. Maybe having somebody call you just to check on you if things aren't going, if there's there's high conflict in the relationship at a certain time. Know where your documents are and keep them in a place where it's easy to grab. Birth certificate, social security number. Once you leave, sometimes abusive partners tend to hide those, destroy those on you. So it's very difficult for you to do things like, get any sort of assistance. If you're an immigrant or something, it's very difficult if you don't have your papers with you. So just sometimes we tell people, or people put a little bag in their car, their documents, or a change of clothing. So if they have to leave quickly, it's already placed in their car and ready to go. Next one, keep a half a tank of gas at all times. That's just so if you have to go, you can go. This isn't all these things, again, aren't doable for some people. They're just examples. And stash money away, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just getting little gas cards for yourself every once in a while, so you'll have gas if you have to leave. So you'll be able to get gas or a little bit of money. So maybe you have enough to stay in a motel for a night, so you can make some calls and try to make some other plans for more long term. So those are examples of the safety planning, but it's very individualized in someone's situation. So there's a lot of things you can do in safety planning that aren't on this slide.
So thinking about community resource, we do have the DV task force, and that is, having that coordinated community response. Because if you think of that safety planning list, none of us individually or even as agencies could do all of those things. So we really do need multiple people on board supporting people in the community who are experiencing abuse. Having a high risk response team, if they are concerned that their partner is going to kill them, that is an we have opportunities to support them in safety, because that is a really, really scary thing. Um, the courts can now do PFAs online, like Lori mentioned, so ways to, support folks who are living in rural areas. And then lots of people, agencies, community groups who care, thinking about KVCAP, they have so many community events to really strengthen communities, because thinking about, again, like cultural things, and also just being an adult in the world, it's hard to make friends as an adult, right? And so like, how do we meet other people who can support us? And because that isolation piece is so hard on anyone, but if you're experiencing abuse, like if you don't have that touchstone to say like, oh, this thing is happening, and I just don't know, like being able to talk about this with someone else is really important. So how can we, just build our communities and support each other? And so KVCAP, lots of community events, lots of support for parents. Our schools are such great resources, and libraries. We do the library campaign every year where we give them books about domestic violence and give them materials, because we know libraries are such a cornerstone of our communities. Health agencies, and that's, the hospitals, the small clinics in rural areas, those are lifelines. And all of our mental health agencies too. Such a huge, huge piece there. Public health centers, first responders, law enforcement, telehealth, all of these places. And I know I'm probably missing some, but knowing how all of these things work together to support folks who are experiencing abuse. And then when we think about working with someone, being patient, being with someone through this, because we know that it can be hard for us as people who care. We want to be like, you need to do this, but this isn't about us and what we think. It's about what they need, this person in front of us, because they're the expert on their life. They are the ones that know their situation best and their abuser best. So being patient with what they need, listen to what they're going through and validate their feelings, whatever they're feeling. They may be having a very wide range of feelings: anger, frustration, fear, whatever it is, validating that feeling and support their strengths. their partner's been tearing them down for so long. Really support what makes them great and, point those things out as well. It's okay to voice concern for their safety. Just be like, I'm really worried about you. How can I support you? Support their decisions, even if it's something you don't agree with. They may have just told you like the little tip of the iceberg when there's all kinds of other stuff going on. They know their abuser best. They've kept themselves safe this long, so support what they're doing. Be non-judgmental. Ask for them what they need, and see what you can do and see what other resources are there, and refer to Family Violence Project. You don't have to be the expert on safety planning, like Lori said. We are here 24/7 for folks, and take care of yourself too in this, whether that's in your workplace capacity or is it your capacity as a friend. Like, do what you need to do to take care of yourself too. Know that you can call the helpline too. And if this is through your role in the community, to get support from your supervisor too, or other folks at your agency. And this is our list of services. Our helpline is there 24 hours a day. The way it works is you call and it gets to an answering service, and we return the call within 15 minutes. We don't leave a voicemail if we miss you, and we'll only try a couple times. And it comes from a block number. So that's just to say, like, if you miss us, call back. And if people can't get a call back, you can also be patched through to an advocate. We have emergency shelter in Kennebec and Somerset. We have court advocates, which Lori is a wonderful court advocate. We have a liaison to Child Protective Services, because we know CPS can be a very scary system. I think I've gone through all of this, and I know like we are at time, so we can stop the recording. Thank you so much for your time, folks. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us.